So much. And Lauren, if I can ask, if I miss a Q&A, a question or something, please feel free to remind me. What I'll do is I do have the chat thread pulled open and I do have my slides over here. So if you see me looking over here, it's not me checking Facebook. I am looking over at my slides. So feel free to drop a question either in the webinar chat or in the question and answer chat. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. This is how to lead event reviews for error-based incidents. I thought it might be fun to start off with a story. Several years ago, I got called in to help on an event, an incident that had happened. This was an electric power utility, and thankfully nobody was injured in this incident. It was more of a switching error incident. They wound up putting about 3,600 customers in the dark unexpectedly, which might not be a big deal if you're just a home or residence, but if you're a business with a manufacturing process in process and all your electricity go down, that can waste thousands or even millions of dollars, as we found out. Lockout tagouts were misplaced. If you all have that system, we call them red tags. It's a big do not operate, and it's a big, big deal to misplace those tags. Some of those got misplaced, so it was a big deal. Field teams and dispatch teams were kind of saying, it's your fault, right? We're fine, it's your fault. And executives were angry with pretty much everybody. They were really grumpy to be around. Nobody wanted to be around them. What I found out as I started getting into the details was this was all about errors, all about miscommunication, decision-making, misunderstandings among about 10 or so different people over about 12 hours. It wasn't one quick mistake. It was a cascade of errors. So this was a complex situation. I got called in to help the three-person investigation team because I was the human error specialist at that time. The problem was on the investigation team, the leader was a woman. Let's call her Julie. And Julie basically took a really hardline approach and said, you know, every error is a failure, and somebody has to be held responsible for every error. That was kind of her point of view. So we kind of disagreed on that, but I went, I'm just kind of the hired help here. So we started talking and started for about an hour or 2 hours or so in the first meeting that we had. And I listened, and the more I listened, the more I went, I don't think this punitive blame-based approach is going to work. I don't think it's going to help us get to really useful stuff. And I don't think anybody's going to tell us anything if we say, well, tell us everything honestly, and then we're going to punish you for it. So I offered something different based on my work in human performance. And they did something unexpected, which was they tried it. And we wound up doing the investigation using this model or a model similar to this. It was a original version of this model. And this is what the client wound up having to say. Your investigation and analysis was the most thorough and well documented of any of we've had to date. The interviews and investigation were not threatening in any way, but you only tried to find the root cause of the error without pointing fingers. And we've already begun implementing some of your recommendations. That was not the leader of the investigation team, but that person's boss. So we were doing something right with this kind of approach. I'll tell you that back then I was still using the terms investigation and root cause. Now, not so much. And I'll get into that in a little bit as we go forward. But that quote had a few of those words in it. I probably wouldn't use those words so much today. And I'll tell you why. Here's a quick overview of what you're going to get today. This is the 6-step event review process. Step number 1, lead and after action review. I'll give you the basics on all of these. Step number 2, write a target question, a question that really focuses your investigation or your event review on one particular thing, because otherwise easy to get distracted. Number 3, create a timeline. You've probably done that before. And find anomalies. You probably haven't done that before. And identify the 3 to 7 most important anomalies to explore. And then for each anomaly, we ask 6 levels of questions, and I'll show you what those different levels are. We start off with 6 questions, and then I'll give you tips on creating more. That's where the really deep analysis happens. Then comes By that time, you have so many ideas on the table, you need to consolidate them and basically boil them down, distill them down to the very best ones, because those are the only ones that are really going to stick. So we distill everything down to about 3 to 7 best process improvements. And then the last step is sharing them with executives or other decision makers, leaders, things like that, and then applying them and then following through. That's it. That's the entire process. So thank you for coming to the webinar. That's it. No. So now we're going to dive into detail kind of on each one of those. Do me a favor and drop into the chat thread. How does that sound to you so far? Just initial thoughts on this process so far. Drop it right into the chat thread. And don't worry, you don't have to do it right now. Take up to the next minute or two or so. Think about it. So there it is. What are your initial thoughts on this 6-step process? By the way, Lauren mentioned this was an article that I wrote recently, and IIRSM was kind enough to publish it. And so it looks just like that. If you scan that, you can get a copy of this article. It'll come up to a web page, and then you want to scroll down just a little bit to a link that says read the article. And it's a 4-page article. Definitely you're going to get more insights today than are just in the article, but it kind of looks like this, and it's the same 6-step process. All right, we got some good comments. All okay to me. More interested in seeing the details. New approach, really informative. Which stage do I identify who will be interviewed? Okay, that's a good question. You'll kind of see that kind of as we go. The after action review, step 1, we sort of do a group interview, if you will. And then in some of the later steps, we come back and do spot interviews if we need to. Short answer for that, Ahmad. Okay. So quick bio on me, just so you kind of know where this process came from. What I do, I help technical experts prevent dangerous and expensive errors. A couple of the hashtags or keywords that I work with: human performance, HOP, which is human and organizational performance, HROs, which is high reliability organizations, and human reliability, kind of the term that covers a lot of different things. The basic approach that I take is a learning-based approach as opposed to a control-based approach. And I'm an advisor. I serve a lot of different companies over the past 9 years: U.S. Department of Energy, Power Engineers, Energy Safety Canada, and about 250 or so other groups, including some companies probably like yours. I was the human performance lead in a large electric utility called Dominion Energy. And that was for about 3,600 electricians, system operators, substation engineers, leaders, electricians, things like that. Very technical folks, line crews. And I did all the human performance for them. That's a lot of where many of the ideas for this approach, this event review approach, came from my work in that group. While I was there, I wound up analyzing about 300 or so incidents, and you heard about one of them earlier today. And I've also kind of lived the high reliability world briefly. I was a firefighter for about 3 years, volunteer firefighter. Was briefly an officer for about 6 months or so. Was an EMT, that's emergency medical technician, and was a paratrooper, United States Army National Guard. Was never in combat, but did the training, and a lot of the stuff that we did as a firefighter, EMT, and a paratrooper, I didn't realize that was human performance, but it absolutely was. So that's a lot of where this process comes from. So feel free to connect with me if you want to. I'll give you that link a little bit later. If you're on LinkedIn, great. If not, no worries at all. But there's some good free resources out there if you want to scan that. So the event review, it's going to be good for some things. It's not going to be good for some things. I don't want to be the person that says, oh, this is all that you need. I don't think that's true. Here's a couple of tips. So event review, the process you're going to get today, is really good, I think, for events with miscommunications, misunderstandings, or other errors, basically human-based decision-making errors, right? It's also good for events where your main goal is to learn and improve. In contrast, what this process is not very good for is it's not very good for events with really complex mechanical or technical failures. when chemical reactions didn't work out the right way, like in a production plant, if metallurgy went wrong, if a bearing broke down because of, vibration or the wrong kind of lubricant. This is not the best kind of process to use for that. Software problems, anything with a lot of technology, this is not going to be a great process. Also, the event review is not going to be good if your main goal is to win or not lose a legal case, or if, unfortunately, if your goal is to assign fault, this isn't going to work very well. So keep in mind, these are kind of the pros and cons. But I'd suspect, and the people that I've talked with, what they've told me is probably 90% of their events or incidents that happen fall into that first category: miscommunications, misunderstandings. And it's not about winning a legal case, it's about learning and improving. I'm curious, if you want to drop into the chat thread, what would you say? What percentage of the incidents in your company fall under the good use criteria here? What would you say? Hopefully it's a fairly high number, but I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's 50%. Drop into the chat thread about what percent of events or incidents in your company fall under the criteria where an event review would probably work. Okay, healthcare, good, 97%. Yeah, okay, 60 to 70%. So generally a pretty high percentage. And that's what I've seen. Okay. So interesting. So the event review process, keep in mind, this isn't something that I would put on a web page. I certainly would not make a form out of it. I do use like a Word document, which is editable, but this is a living, evolving process. So I never give exactly the same event review twice. I always adapt it to a certain client or a certain need or a certain team. So the biggest advice I think I can give you is, don't take this and turn it into a lockstep form where you must fill this out. It's required. It's a compliance based. You have to fill this out. That will kill it. Please don't do that. I adapt it every time I do it, and I hope you will too. Okay, first step, lead an after action review. I learned after action reviews in the fire service when I was a firefighter, but they originated in the military as a way to debrief missions. And this is a team actually doing an after action review. Notice the high technology that's required here. A pack of cigarettes, if you're into that, or a deck of cards, or a stick drawn in the sand, it requires almost no technology. It's not a form, it's not a report. An after action review is a discussion. Does it work? Well, here's one research study from Tannenbaum and Sarasoli. This is in 2012. And they found from a meta study that organizations can improve individual and team performance by about 20 to 25% using properly conducted debriefs, after action reviews. So if nothing else, what you can take away from this is, this might be a really, really good way to improve organizational results, even without going into incidents. What is an after action review? How do you do it? It's a non-punitive, semi-structured post-job debrief. That's it. It's really just getting together after a job or after an event or an incident and kind of going, okay, how did this work and what can we learn from it? Who uses them? A lot of military units, firefighters, EMTs, and an increasing number of companies are starting to use these things too over the past 30 years. How do you lead one? Gather the event participants, and it should be a pretty small group, maybe 9 or 10 people, 6 to 9 people, nothing too much bigger than that. As much as you can, assure a non-punitive, psychologically safe, learning-based approach. We say, at least in the US, we say Vegas rules applies. I don't know if you all have that saying in different countries. You might not, but the idea is Vegas, as in Las Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas means we're not going to talk about what happens if you do something here that we wouldn't put on YouTube. We're not going to share it on YouTube. Let's just do that. So many people apply Vegas rules to after action reviews, and they basically say what happens here stays here. In United Kingdom, you all might be more familiar with the Chatham House rule, because that originated in London. Chatham House rule says, hey, in this discussion, after we all break, we're all free to discuss the ideas that we had in this discussion, but not who said them, who supported them, who opposed them. That's actually what I tend to approve or really like is the Chatham House rule. But that's what I would start off with. And then you ask these questions, and there's some real applied psychology under the hood of these questions. Here's the questions in an after action review. So, what did we set out to do? What did we actually do? How did it turn out that way? What do we do the same way? And the next time we do this event or the next time we do this mission, what will we do the same way? And question number 5, you've probably already figured it out. What do we do differently next time? So this is step 1 of an event review, is do an after action review. Get the people involved together. As much as possible, make it non-punitive and say, listen, we're not going to have any punishment or discipline come out of this unless, for example, somebody broke a state or a government law. But let's discuss openly kind of what happened. And if people know they're not going to get punished or disciplined for something, they're going to be a lot more open to talk about this stuff. So those are the questions. I'm curious, and I thought we'd have a little bit of fun with this, is go ahead and pull out your phone, and let's see if this works. It should. I'm going to go do the same thing. And here we go. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. It's a poll. It's just a simple Google poll. I'm going to do the same thing that you're doing. You should see it come up just like that. And it's basically one question. And I thought it might be kind of fun for us to do this. And I'll show you how to see the results in just a moment. And go ahead and pick and go ahead and hit submit. And when you hit submit, you're going to see a different sign that looks like this, or a different page that looks like this. You're going to see 2 links, and they're going to look like that. You want to click the top link that says see previous responses. And when you click that link, you will see previous responses. Basically, that's it. So I'm going to do that here. I'm going to click here. And we've got 13 responses. I don't know how many people we have on. We've got 33 people on, so that's great. It'd be nice to get a few more responses, but if you don't want to play, that's okay too. And that's what the screen will look like. So anyway, feel free to take that now or later if you want to. And I'm going to do this for people that aren't quite up for doing this. That just came back. Give me just a second. And what I thought I would do was just put this poll in there. I don't want to pop out of full screen too often, but I think this is the only time. Okay. Okay. And I believe I am still sharing, but if not, I'm going to go back and double check. Here we go and do that. Okay. So now you have it in the chat thread as well. Okay. So looks like 62% of people already lead after action reviews, and they're helpful. About 23% of people are saying we do some, but this process looks a little bit better. About 20% of people are saying nope, we've never heard of them before. So great. So I'm glad you all are doing them. Drop into the chat thread if you like. Are they useful? Do you get some good results for them? And I'm curious whether you do them just for events or incidents, or whether you do them to debrief regular everyday jobs as well. So feel free to drop some of that into the chat thread. Okay, so step 2, because we're going to keep moving along here. After you do an after action review, what that will do is 1, build a lot of trust. 2, it's going to get you a lot of initial information about what happened in the incident, maybe more than you need. So at this point, you want to move to step 2 and write a target question. Because if you just have a lot of information, it's going to be very distracting, and you got to kind of focus it into what is the question we're trying to solve. And a lot depends on that question. It may seem the question you're trying to answer in an event review is obvious. I don't think it is. And I thought we'd have a little bit of fun playing with it. Let's go to an incident that many people know something about, which was the RMS Titanic sinking. So this happened a long time ago, but most of you have some idea of the events that happened. Even if you watch the movie, other than the romance with Jack and Rose, which was fictional, much of the other stuff was reasonably accurate. Let's see, and I got a quick question here. trying to sell the idea that there is no one on the call all the time. What's the longest time span that needs to pass for an AAR? James, I would try to do them as quickly as possible, like right after the job finishes. It's almost always easiest to do it right then. The longer you wait, the more that people tend to forget. So yeah. So here's a target question. So imagine that you were, or you are the lead investigator for the Titanic incident. What target question would you write for this investigation? So you can feel free to drop in your ideas into the chat thread, but I'm going to ask you a few of these. How about this one? Why did the Titanic sink? Is that a good question? Is that a good target question for an event review? Drop into the chat thread. What do you think? Good question or no? What do you say? Yeah, pretty broad. What should we do so that it never happens again? Okay, Natalie says no. Okay, I would agree, and I would say no. This isn't a great target question. Couple of reasons why. One, the main one is it's backward looking. It's basically asking why did this thing happen in the future. So that's a great kind of a historical question. And for some things, like in very mechanical systems, you're going to want to know why it broke down the way that it did, because that is almost always going to tell you what part to replace to fix it. Problem is, when you have mostly human-based decision making, and if you go backwards, you're going to wind up getting into kind of a hall of mirrors or a spider's web. There is almost never a root cause for a miscommunication or a series of miscommunications. Look into your own experience and see whether that's true or not. So I'd say going backwards like that can give you some interesting stuff, but it's basically it's descriptive, but it's not prescriptive, as I say in the article, right? Um, it's good for a classic root cause analysis, but not necessarily for an event review. So I would say this is not so much of a great question. How about this one? Why didn't the captain and crew take better actions to save more lives after the collision? Now, some people, that would be a burning question for them. Why didn't these people do better? Is that a good question or not? What would you say? All right, James, focusing on people, not process, right? Nelle, I believe I'm saying that right, says no. Jay Jordan says no. Yeah, Susan, very much. It's a lot about blame. Exactly. That's what I would say is this not a great question? And one big reason is it's primarily focusing on blame. Blame may feel good to say, wow, we found the perpetrators, but it almost never solves the problem because, as several people here are saying, it's not so much about the people. Certainly, people have a responsibility to take good actions. And we want to find out if that didn't happen. But people make actions or take actions for reasons. And let's figure out the systemic reasons why they acted in certain ways. So, yeah, I would say probably this is not a good question because it's primarily blame focused. A good way that I would say this is stay away from the ABCs, A's, B's, and C's. A's are assumptions, right? You always want to try to base your information in fact, not opinion. You can't always get a fact or a document or a videotape for everything, but you can certainly try to back it up. So stay away from assumptions, blame, that's the B, and C is counterfactuals, which is this. This is a great example of a counterfactual. Sidney Dekker wrote about this several years ago in one of his books and said that a counterfactual is an example or a description of events that never happened, but that you wish had happened. It's kind of a fancy word for a fantasy, right? Your assumption, your fantasy is the captain, the crew did everything humanly possible to save lives. Well, that almost is never going to happen in a real world incident. So grading them against a utopian sort of fantasy probably isn't the best thing to do. Ask instead, how does this compare with what other people did, what they intended to do, things like that. So that's why I'd stay away from that question. How about this one? How can we maximize safety on maritime passenger cruises based on what we learned from the Titanic incident? What do you think about that one? So this one To me, and again, I'm not saying there's an ultimate right or wrong on this. I'm trying to give you better and worse. But most of you all, yeah, bingo, James, right? And Lucian, good one. Susan, thank you. Natalie, as well. And Talini, I hope I got that name right. This, I would say, is a pretty good question. One, it's forward looking. It's not just backwards looking, saying what was the cause, what happened. It's actually asking what can we do to make this better in the future, which is the ultimate question I think we're trying to answer. And it avoids the A's, B's, and C's, right? We know we had a big problem with loss of life on this one. We're not making assumptions on that. So we're trying to stay away from assumptions too. We're not blaming any person or any system necessarily for this, trying to stay away from blame. And three, we're trying to stay away from counterfactuals as well and asking a very relevant real world question that we don't know the answer to. So that's why I'd say this is a good target question. So, um, question, is this something, how does this compare to what you already do? Maybe you already write target questions like this. If so, wonderful. If not, let me know. Can this help in your organization with how you write target questions for investigations? Drop that in the chat thread. So step three, create the timeline and find anomalies. Let me give you a different example for this one. This is back to our electric electric power utility event. This is a fictional timeline, but it's a pretty good representation of what we actually wrote up in that incident. It was about 2 pages long. It had the date, obviously, and the times, obviously. And then we didn't use names. We did EP3 or EP4 is event participant 3, event participant 4. And that way we didn't put any names in there. And again, we didn't frame it in terms of dispatch operator failed to do this or that. Never use those terms. Talk about what they did, not what they failed to do or forgot to do or whatever. That's a counterfactual. And as you're doing your timeline, you'll notice some questions, some things that make you go, well, why did that happen? Okay, mark those, and I simply mark those in yellow highlighter in the Word document. As soon as we come up with them, I just mark it just like this one. Question, is that where it should have been placed? And that's one of your anomalies. So you may collect a lot of anomalies as you do your timeline. Great, no problem. Here's a couple of anomalies that are examples that we actually used. Number one, clearance person went home without releasing headway, without giving permission back that circuit is good and ready to be energized again. The day shift placed the canceled lockout tagout request in the wrong location. I didn't say they failed to put it in the right location. I said, okay, they put it in the wrong location. And that leads us to ask, okay, why did they do that? Was it the first time they did that? Was it set up? The two bins look almost exactly identical. Why? It leads to better questions, I think. So these are some anomalies that you can go for. And you want to collect about 3 to 7 anomalies. I'd say in the beginning, as you're doing your timeline, collect all the anomalies you can. What you're going to find out, I think, is as you go back and re-interview people, and this is an answer to the gentleman, I believe, who asked me, when do you interview people? As you're creating your timeline, you're going to use the information from your after action review, but you're also going to go, well, wait, we don't have any information on this. Let's call back up the dispatch operator and re-interview them and just ask them this one specific question. Hey, dispatch operator, what happened between 6:32 a.m. and 7:46 a.m. because we're not quite sure. Do you have any recollection of that? They can fill in a lot of your anomalies by doing kind of quick spot interviews, but you're still going to be left with about 3 to 7 anomalies that you probably can't explain. And that's where you dive deep. You dive deep into the 6 levels of questions for each anomaly. And here's the 6 levels of questions. And again, this is an actual anomaly that I've worked with before in an incident. Clearance person went home without releasing headway. So what questions do you ask to understand that? Here's the 6 that I would suggest. 1, you don't start with what went wrong. I'm going to give a tip of the hat to Eric Holnagel and his work on Safety 2. If you've read that before, Safety 1 versus Safety 2 by Eric Holnagel, he suggests Ask how jobs get done right 99% of the time before you ever ask how they get done, how they went wrong this time. And I've naturally done that for many years, and I found it's a game changer. It builds an enormous amount of trust. It defuses a lot of tension and stress in the conversation when you start a conversation by saying, "Hey, listen, how do you usually do this task right? And how does it get done safely, not just by you, but by other people?" And that way you put the expert into the driver's seat. They're in command. They get to tell you, well, it's not as simple as just following a procedure, right? So ask, how do frontline experts usually do this task? And obviously you want to ask that of the frontline experts. Um, Second question is, okay, what individual actions led to this anomaly? What did, Fred or Mary or Megan do that helped lead to this anomaly? Because those are often the easiest ones to identify, right? You want to start there. You can start there, but you don't end there. You go deeper. So you ask then, third question is, what situational factors led to this anomaly? See how we start? It's almost like a pyramid where we start at the top. The most obvious is individual actions, but then we go a level deeper into what in your situation led you to do that. For example, when you were replacing a bulk feeder splice in an underground vault, was it super hot outside? Was it like, 105 degrees and you were, you know, almost getting heat exhaustion? Was it super cold where you were so cold you just couldn't focus? Was it raining and you couldn't hear things and it was miserable? Were you just getting over a cold or a flu? Were you taking care of an elderly relative at home and you're really concerned with them, so you were a little bit distracted? What situational factors led to your individual actions? Fourth question is, what supervisory factors led to this anomaly? Supervisory factors are simply, what did your boss tell you to do? We all listen to our boss. Our boss kind of it controls our life, work life, kind of more than any other single person, right? Not so much the organization or the general manager or whatever. It's like, what did your boss tell you to do? And that's your boss, your supervisor. Did they say, "Hey, listen, I want you to do this safely, but we're under a time crunch, so I think you hear what I'm saying. Do it safely, but I need you to get it done." If you've ever heard something like that before, that's a supervisory factor that's definitely going to push you to make more errors, cut corners, things like that, right? Fifth question I'd say is, what are the organizational or cultural factors that led to this anomaly? Remember our pyramid where we kind of start at the top, the most obvious, but then we keep going down layer by layer, almost like peeling layers of an onion. And the deepest layer to go to is, what about your organization or just the culture of your company led to this anomaly? Do you work in a company where people say, we just get stuff done, and then if it breaks, we fix it afterwards? Yeah, the whole company is like that. Wow, okay, it's not the way I work, but okay. Um, did you go through training? Was the training sort of like, well, here, watch these videos, fill in these check boxes, and then you're trained. Now, good luck, don't make any mistakes. Wow, that's a pretty big organizational setup for failure, right? So those are the kind of questions you want to ask in that level. And the last question I'd always end up the interview with is, hey, Mr. or Miss Frontline Expert, what process improvements would you suggest? How can we prevent this incident from happening again? What would you suggest? Do we need to get a different kind of bulk feeder splice? Do we need to put more lifeboats on the Titanic? Let them tell you, as the frontline expert, what they see. They're not always going to be right or feasible, right, economically, but they may have some ideas that you've never thought of. So those are the 6 questions I'd start off with. And definitely, I'd say go deeper than that. You're always going to think up different questions that are tailor made to your incident or the investigation that you're doing and the incident that you're doing. So I hope that makes sense. Couple of questions that we've asked before are, hey, do things change when you're on the dispatch desk and you're moving electricity around and you're doing switching orders for a large electric utility? Are things different on a blue sky day, a day when nothing goes wrong, everything's fine, it's very almost boring? Are things different then than when there is an incident or a storm outside. And what we heard from dispatch operators was incredibly different. It is two different worlds. One incident that I was on, we actually wound up realizing that 8 different incidents, similar incidents, all happened during storm duty. That was the one thing that drew them all together. All 8 of those incidents didn't happen on normal blue sky days when everybody was taking their time. They all happened when managers were saying, we gotta get this out. We gotta get this switching orders done. And that caused the dispatchers to make mistakes. So you got to think up your own questions. And I'm just tight on time here, so I'm going to skip that. We'll keep the questions kind of at the end. Here's just a tip, just a practical tip for leading these, and I'll talk to some questions in the chat thread. What I've noticed is when I've tried to lead a conversation and take notes on a conversation, it never works. It never works well. Either I don't lead the conversation very well or I take terrible notes. So what I've found is in almost any small group discussion, including any event review, one of the biggest best practices I can possibly give you is if you're going to be the leader and you're going to be the person leading the conversation, have someone else be your scribe or note taker. And what I usually do is just have a Word document, a simple Word document, super easy to edit, and I have it projected up on a screen in the room so that everybody can see it. The entire small group can see it. And my scribe is typing, taking notes. And if I say, hey, Jim, that was a really good comment. Michael, who's the scribe, Michael, can you take that down and just make sure you got it? Michael's probably already ahead of my game and taken down Jim's quote. And everybody will look at it and go, Jim, is that accurate what you said? Now we got it in writing, right? And Jim can say, well, it wasn't exactly that way. And then, Michael and Jim will go back and forth and edit it until Jim is happy with it. Everybody else sees it. And I go, yes, that's super good. That doesn't take much time, but those 2 roles are super important to have, the leader and the scribe, different roles. But that's how I do event review meetings, and it works really well. Okay, step 5. After you've asked your 6 levels of questions and maybe re-interviewed several people, now you've probably got a whole ton of good ideas, probably more than you can use. In a minute, I will get into that and show you kind of how to distill that down. But let me speak to a couple of comments that we've got here so far. This is great comments. Thank you. Let's see. Yeah, frontline expert. Yeah, puts the tech in a position of expertise and recognizes you rely on their input. Question from Jay Jordan: is it better to focus on the components of the system and their interactions, a relationship, rather than a focus on seeking a root cause? Yes, I would absolutely say that. In fact, you'll notice in my event review process, the words root cause or root causes, plural, don't exist. I don't look for root causes, not in this. Now, in a mechanical failure, if an engine breaks or something, that's very appropriate, I think, to look for a root cause because it's a design system. In any system of human interaction, it's not a design system, it's an evolved system. It just keeps adapting. It's what some people call a complex adaptive system. And in complex adaptive systems, there's almost never a root cause for something. So I think it's much more useful to look for practical process improvements, not root causes. Hope that answers your question. I perform always an assessment of the standard compared with the as-is situation. So that's kind of the work as done versus work as imagined. Sounds like this is guessed that you're doing some version of an after-action review. Okay. Yeah, James. Yeah, I appreciate that. In socio-technical environments, again, I'm not saying root causes are wrong. A good friend of mine spent his entire life doing root causes, and he's incredibly good at it. And we like to argue for sport. It's fun because he'll continually look at my stuff and kind of go, well, I see the value in it, and then we order another round of drinks or another bagel. But yes, RCAs I think are good and useful, especially for mechanistic or mechanical type things, just not so much for what you would call socio-technical ones. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So watching our time here. So this step, what do you do to distill the best ones? Let's go back to our Titanic incident. I thought it might be fun to go do this and say, okay, what are some of the process improvements that you might come up with? Put yourself back into the role of the lead investigator for the Titanic incident and think to yourself, okay, now that we've finished the investigation, what are some of the takeaways that we're going to want published publicly? And this is what we think we should do. These are our results, basically. How about this one? What if your investigation came up with this? We recommend that you all write additional safety procedures and require ship crew to comply with them. Is that a good process improvement or not? Drop it into the chat thread. What do you think? And if you think it is or it isn't, why? Jay, why do you think it's not a good process improvement? What do you think? People need more tools, not more rules. That's a good catchy way of saying it. It's correct, but it's also a good memorable one. Jim, I may use that if that's okay. That's great. Depends. Okay. Uh, love that. We can't comply our way to good safety, Elaine. Wonderful. I use that quote as well. I don't know of any company that's ever complied their way to excellence. Richard Madden, hey, good to see you too. Name, blame, and retrain, exactly. And Susan, that's an interesting point you bring up too. Even if the rule might be a good one, trying to get people to comply with rules is, we used to say in the military, it's a goat rodeo. Just let that image sink in for a minute. Yeah, horses that can kind of be trained and stuff like that for rodeo, goats, not so much. And human beings, a lot more like goats some ways. Yeah, follow these rules. No, I don't think so. Um, so let's yeah, thank you. What should we do if the company requires an accident report? That's a good question. Many companies do. That's a bigger question. But the short answer I would say is I wouldn't come in with this and say, let's stop doing accident reports. We need to do event reviews instead. You're going to trigger a lot of resistance from a lot of people who want those old accident reports. What I would do in the beginning is do them both, right? I would do this one first. I would do the event review first because it's going to build trust, get your actual answers, and get really good results. And then afterwards, fill out the accident report or the accident investigation report. Over time, after you do like 2 or 3 or 4 of these, what I've found is leaders will look at them and go, wow, our required compliant process gets ridiculously bad results, and their process gets way better results. Then over time, your leaders will wind up going, you know what? Maybe we should just drop this old one and do this new one. There's your Jedi mind trick for the day, right? Don't fight the old paradigm. Do the new paradigm and fly under the radar with it, or do it as much as you can until the old one just becomes obsolete. That's the short answer that I can give you. Okay. How about this one? Write additional safety procedures. Yeah, good improvement or not? I would say probably not. Again, it's trying to basically just do compliance. Basically, it's focusing mostly on the work as imagined, the policy, not the work as done, right? You can have people say, I will follow this. We call it read and heed, right? It's in my LMS. I had to watch this. I had to sign this. Does it actually change behavior? Almost never, right? But it makes the lawyers and regulators happy because they have it on paper. They just wonder why people don't comply because people didn't evolve to comply, right? We evolved to think on our own, right? How about this one? Increased penalties for captains and crews who fail to protect passengers. How about that one? Good improvement or not? What do you say? Right? Again, yeah, so much with the blaming. No, already blaming, blame, blame, blame. Yeah, you got it, right? That's basically it because of the blame. What it's going to do is actually silence people who are the truth tellers. You got these frontline experts, both the leaders, the captain, the operations people, the bosuns, all of the folks on the ship, and they know and they see things that nobody else sees, right? And if they're scared that they're going to get punished or not listened to, they're not going to tell you what those magic process improvements are. So that's in that very real way, rules and compliance initiatives shut down truth telling. How about this one for a process improvement? If you were the lead investigator for the Titanic incident, hey, we recommend that designers design every ship based on the belief that someday it will unexpectedly start to sink. Remember, the Titanic was thought to be unsinkable, right? So they designed the ship kind of thinking it can't sink. So what would happen if we instead turned that around and told ship designers, design every ship you build as if one day it will start taking on water? Is that a good process improvement? Mhm. I like that, James. You obviously know the HRO literature, preoccupation with failure. Maybe phrase it a little bit differently. Cool. Got it. Um, and yes, looks at the worst case scenario and plans for it. Susan. So this is, I would just say, hashtag reliability, excuse me, hashtag resilience on this, which is the hallmark of a high reliability organization. The best way I can describe a high reliability organization is they don't try to eliminate errors. They try to make it so that errors don't disable you. Um, and in this case, if you assume that the error is going to happen, we either hit an iceberg or there's a leak or a porthole left open or whatever it is. Now, what do we do? You're going to make the ship resilient. You're going to have like watertight automatic bulkheads. You're going to have self-sealing doors. You're going to have better bilge pumps. You're going to have more lifeboats so that when the unthinkable happens, you can recover from it and the air does not disable you. That's resilience in a nutshell. Yeah. Um, and we got that one. How about this one for a takeaway? Crew regularly practices live action, hands-on emergency drills with actual rescue equipment on board, and then you debrief and improve and document. Is that a good takeaway? What do you think? And guess, yeah, equip each ship with binoculars. And you sound like you know the story of what happened with the binoculars on the Titanic, right? Yeah. Hands-on training. Thanks, Susan. Yep. And Ahmad, yep. Maximizes best case outcomes. And it also does a couple of other things in a sneaky way too. One, because you're debriefing and improving and documenting, you're getting people to go through these rescue scenarios that I spent a lot of time doing. And you learn tons from doing that. You wind up saying, wow, that lifeboat looked really good up on the rack. But when we actually put it into practice, it didn't come out, it almost didn't go into the ocean or whatever. So you wind up getting more process improvements. Stuff like this doesn't just create real confidence and it doesn't just change work as done. It does all that. It also creates this feedback loop between the frontline experts who do the rescues and the designers who build the lifeboats and the life jackets and all the alarm systems and stuff like that. So yeah. So I'd say that's a good one. All right. Um, so that's it for step 4. Now steps, or excuse me, step 5, step 6, what do you do once you've gotten your 3 to 7 highest value process improvements? Many places, many companies will say, we want to write up a thick report. And again, regulators love that because they love to drop those reports on the table. And like the louder the thud, the more impressive the report is. That's the model that they tend to go by. But in reality, what almost always happens is almost nobody reads that entire report. Almost no one, in my experience. What they say is, well, give me the short version, just the executive summary. Everybody, including the executives, wants the executive summary, not just the executives. Everybody wants that. So on one job that I was on, we said, well, let's just do that then. And here's how we did it. We did a PowerPoint, not a report, and we made it an interactive discussion. And these are mock-ups of literally the slides that we did. First slide was the title. Second slide was our target question, right? Put that up front. Third question was the methodology. If you're a research geek, this was your methodology. I just put the 6-step review, event review process that we did. And those are your first 3 slides. Step 4, or slide number 4, go right to your bottom line. Here's process improvement number one, and here's what we think and why, right? And then two, put your next process improvement, and then your next process improvement. You might have 3 to 7, and that's it. And your discussion with the executives or senior leaders, you can figure out, okay, do we want to accept this one and do this one? Who's going to be responsible for it? How are they going to implement it, and by when? And you figure all that stuff out in one 45-minute meeting, or maybe two, something like that. That's what I would say in terms of sharing, applying, and following through. You don't want a 50-page document with 30 corrective actions, because that's almost always going to get pencil whipped or forgotten, or it's just overwhelming. But 3 to 7 process improvements, everybody can handle that and wrap their brain around that. So that, folks, is a roller coaster ride over the event review process. Usually I do this as a half-day workshop, a full-day workshop for clients that I lead this for. I'm actually going to go do that on Monday down in Georgia. But that's it for the event review process. I want to give you a couple of resources. This is again the article. If you want to get that, just scroll down to click and read the article. And Lauren may be able to drop that into the chat thread. I think it's in the chat thread earlier if you want it to go to article on that. This you might find useful. This is something that I put together with a lot of the things that I mentioned in there. After action reviews are in there right there. Event reviews are in there right there. But this is kind of useful, interesting to have. It is on Amazon. The Kindle version is on Amazon. And the hard copy, if you want hard copies, are only on my website, and there's the link to it right there. It's reliableorg.com. A couple of things that are in there, biases and event reviews, things like that. There's the Amazon link to it. And if you liked what you got from me today, we will open up for questions in just a minute or so. But if you liked what you got from this today, you might like some of the other things that I do, including 7 practical steps, problem-solving workshop, after-action reviews, pre-job briefings, and of course, I do workshops and obviously lead event reviews for companies like yours all around the world. If you'd like to download that catalog with all kinds of details and all my contact information, you can download it right there. And I'll drop that into the chat thread as well. And then I think we're going to have time for a few questions. I'm going to check a look at the chat thread.